Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I hope we're all well. This is some Christian guy. You can find me on Facebook, oneway.com/ram media, and on YouTube. Today we're going to be discussing, or continuing, the Bible Contradictions series. And today we're on the third objection, which is as follows. Let's go right straight and get into it. Now today's one is actually going to be fairly easy because I'm not entirely, or whoever came up with these Bible contradictions, I'm not entirely sure what they were doing, but they're clearly not reading what's going on. So it's going to be fairly quick. Number three, so number three we have here, how many sons did Abraham have, right? And here's the list of, and we're going to go through all of them. Right, and it's very quick. You'll see very straight away. So the objection is that there's a contradiction here, because it asserts in some places that Abraham had one son, when we know that he actually had two, and so on and so forth. So for example, initially there was, basically, the story of Abraham is he was promised a son by God, and it took quite a while for this to materialize. So Sarah, his wife, decided of her own accord that they were going to fulfill God's promise to them, that they were going to do it for him. And so Sarah says to Abraham, listen, Abraham, take a concubine, one of the servants, and have a child with her, and in this sense God's promise that you're going to have a son or children will then be fulfilled, right? And now this was done completely ignoring God's promise that was specifically applied to Abraham and his wife Sarah, right? Sarah was going to have a son, not some other machinations with human by getting concubines and stuff like that. So that's the background for it. And the reason why they doubted so much is because Sarah and Abraham were quite old before actually Isaac came along. So essentially Ishmael was born before Isaac, okay? But Ishmael was born to a servant, a concubine, another wife, so to speak. But he never, as far as one can tell, he never necessarily married her or anything like that. And we know, and just ask any Christian, God does not recognize, God only recognizes the first marriage unless there was some, under very specific conditions, that when divorce and things like that are allowed, and then you're allowed to remarry. But other than that, God does not recognize any of your marriages except for the first one, right? Outside of very specific circumstances. And so that's pretty much what we're dealing with here. So let's go into the verses and have a quick look. The first one they give is in Hebrews 11:17. So basically it talks about when he was offering up Isaac, and then over here it calls Isaac his only begotten son, right? His only begotten son. Now why does it do that, right? Because clearly Abraham has got Ishmael at this time as well. Why does it do that? The reason it does that is because the story of Abraham and Isaac, why Isaac goes and offers his son up as a sacrifice, is actually a typology, right? So even though the actual event, obviously it happened, okay, but typologically the story of Abraham and Isaac is typologically the story of God the Father and God the Son. So Isaac here, typologically speaking, right, the whole situation is a, how can you say, a type of Christ. So Isaac fulfills two, in the typology, Isaac fulfills two roles, right? So the sacrifice that to give us the sense and the feeling of what it's like to give up a son. So Abraham being typologically God the Father, Isaac being typologically Jesus Christ. But in the ultimate, in the end, Christ is Isaac is spared. Isaac is not killed. So which and in that sense, Isaac then typologically becomes us, So the sinners, we don't have to die for our sins. Jesus Christ does it. And then at the end of the story, instead of Isaac being sacrificed, there is a ram. So this here is for the typology, is talking about Isaac, the only begotten son, is typologically like Jesus, because Jesus is also called the only begotten son of God, right? The only begotten. And also because God does not recognize the second marriage, right? He therefore as recognizes Isaac only as the only and the special one, the legitimate child. Because here's the thing, the reason why God was going to insisted that he was going to fulfill this himself with his legitimate wife, his first wife, is because God, the whole idea of a legitimate and illegitimate child and so on and so forth. So Jesus is not an illegitimate child, and so on and so forth. So that's why it refers to Isaac in this way, even though Isaac is not the only one. And this is well known. It's not a contradiction. This is speaking typologically, and also, so this is a sense. There's a fallacy lurking in here somewhere, where someone is trying to say, because they refer to Isaac in this way, it's a reckoning fallacy. So the people, the culture, God, and so on and so forth, they only recognized Isaac because Isaac was a legitimate son from his first wife, rather than Ishmael, who was the illegitimate son of Hagar. Right, so that's the context that it's talking about in. So it's not a contradiction. It's talking about it in the proper, how can you say, in the proper cultural and religious reckoning in this particular thing. Also, it sets up the typology of the story of Abraham and Isaac and the sacrifice. There's a very, very strong typology here, because this foreshadows, the whole story foreshadows the coming of Christ to be sacrificed, and is actually, because pagans in those days were often sacrificing their children to the gods, the story of Abraham and Isaac is actually set up specifically to show us that we're not the ones that are supposed to be sacrificing our children. The one who was going to be sacrificed was Jesus and not us. So it was not actually our place at all, because Abraham came from a pagan background. It would have been, that's one of the reasons why he reasoned in his own mind that this was probably the right thing to do, because Abraham himself came from a pagan background, and he was probably used to this kind of thing where this happened around him. In his mind, he probably thought that this request was legitimate, because in many ways that's all he ever really knew. And because God is with Abraham, is specifically trying to delineate a difference between himself and the pagan gods, he then sets up what we call an object lesson. He sets up this object lesson to go down in history to say, listen, you are not the ones that are supposed to be sacrificing your children or any of that sort of nonsense. Stop killing your kids. By the way, abortion, all that kind of stuff. Stop killing your kids for the sake of whatever. This is not who I am. The one that's going to make the sacrifice is me. I'm the one that's going to do it, right? And that's one of the big differences between the Christian faith and the other religions. Is other religions, you are the one that always sacrifices. The gods are over there, and you need to climb Mount Olympus in order to try and reach the gods. Whereas in Christianity, God comes down and himself, and he reaches out to you himself. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Genesis 2. Now take thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, get thee to the land of Moriah, and offer him therefore a burnt offering. Now this is just a recapitulation again on the previous one. It's the exact same thing. Interestingly enough, for those of you who don't realize it, the word love, this is the first time the word love is mentioned in the Bible, right? The very, very first time. And if we see that Isaac is a typology, is a dual typology, not only of Jesus Christ, but also of us, right? Then the first time the word love is ever mentioned in the Bible, typologically speaking, is not only between Abraham and his son, but typologically speaking, between God the Father, his own son, and us, right? The first time that love is ever mentioned in the Bible is this, right? And this is just an instruction, thine only son. Again, thine only son is again a reference to, is a typological reference to Christ, and a cultural and religious reckoning that they only recognize the legitimate child and not the illegitimate child, right? And also begotten in the Old Hebrew, not the Old Hebrew, in the Hebrew, doesn't only how can you say, the only begotten, it doesn't only specifically apply to number, like there was only one, but it applies that there's something special about this unique person. So even if there's 5 children and there's an only begotten one, so it's singling out one of many for a very, very specific, special purpose, right? Which is so, for example, Jesus is the Son of God, but we are also called sons and daughters of God. But Jesus, even though we're all sons of, are referred to as sons and daughters of God, the only one who is begotten is Jesus Christ. So Jesus is one, the first among all of us as sons and daughters of God, and so on and so forth. So it's not merely, so when people are looking at this and saying he's referring that numerically, existentially, only one, it's not necessarily the case. Only begotten also refers to not necessarily one singular, there's only one child, but out of a number of children can also mean one specific child singled out for a specific purpose. All right, so there's no contradiction here at all. This has been known, this has been doctrine. If someone had just bothered to read this clearly, read this carefully, and understand Christian doctrine, they would have seen this is not a contradiction at all. Right, and Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare Ishmael. Well, you know, there we go. Hagar, this is an illegitimate child, because again, reckoning. So this is just a reference that Abraham did have a son. And it also must be noticed here that over here he's still called Abram, right? Not Abraham. Okay, so his name hasn't changed yet. Sarah's name name hasn't been changed yet. So the Bible, when it's using these different names and all of this kind of language, this cultural and religious language surrounding these individuals, it is showing you that what's happening here is not a covenantal issue, first of all, and is an illegitimate issue, right? This is not this is man by his own works trying to achieve the promises of God, rather than allowing God to achieve his own purposes himself. Right, then 21, 2-3, Sarah conceived in his old age, and so it basically recapitulates the same thing. And if you understand the principle, right, now over here, again, she's called Sarah and he's called Abraham. So now when it's talking about Isaac, he's got the covenantal, the name change, right? The name change is then there. This is legitimate. This is the God ordained sort of thing. And if you understand the theology, the cultural understanding, the religious understanding of it, makes perfect sense. There's a reason why the writer of Genesis referred to these things in the way that he did. All right. So this just recapitulates the issue. No contradiction there. Is actually being quite consistent and actually being very specific by specifically in the one only calls him Abram, right? Doesn't mention Sarah here, but in the rest of the text it does. And then as soon as it's talking about Isaac, immediately there you have the name change, you have the covenantal name change. It's no longer Abram, it's now Abraham. It's no longer Sarai, it's now Sarah. Okay, so the writer is actually being very, very, there's a lot of subtle details that the writer is actually really paying attention to here. So again, not a contradiction. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, Jokshan, Meda, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Now again, Nowhere here is it talking about Abraham having only one son or anything like that. And you can see that now in this particular situation, this is much later after Isaac was born, and his wife Sarah died, and he married another woman called Keturah, and she gave him another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children. Okay, so no contradiction here. This is referring to a later period. So the individual, when bringing up this particular verse, is making absolutely no distinction between differences in time period, right? So if I have a child now, right, in 2019, it is legitimate to say that I have only one child. But if I have another child 2 years down the line, it then becomes legitimate to say that I now have 2 children. And previously, when they said I had one child in 2019, it's not a contradiction, it's not an error. So no contradiction here. This is simply a later period in time. After Sarah had passed away, he married another woman and she gave him another 6 children. Nothing, no contradiction here, nothing wrong with that. Whoever brought this up it's just, again, failure to recognize different times, failure to read the text carefully at all. I mean, I don't know what this person's doing, honestly, when they bring up these things up. I really don't get it. Now this one is the real kicker, right? So if we go back, right, to the thing here, right, it lists here Genesis 4:22. Now this is really, really weird. Okay, I have no idea why this person does that, okay, at all. Because if you have a look, all right, so we go there, Genesis 4:22. Here it is. It's talking about and Adam and Eve knew his wife, and what you eventually have is a genealogy, okay? Enoch was born to Irad. Irad began Mehujael, Methusael, and so on and so forth. Lamech, what? 21. And then this is the reverse that they refer to, right? And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer, brass, iron, and sister of Tubal-Cain was Nema. Abraham's not even born. This is before the flood. Okay, I don't know why this person. This literally has nothing to do with the issue. So I honestly don't know. This can only have been brought up by someone. This was either an honest mistake, right? An honest mistake, or someone is just so rabidly anti-Christian that they will just throw anything in there. And this is not even a failure to read the text carefully. Or, I mean, you can be generous with some of the others, that maybe the person wasn't very careful, and okay, fair enough. But to now cough up a verse in which, I mean, Abraham's not even born yet. This is before the flood. This is completely different people, right? It's completely different people that they're talking about here. This is nothing. This literally has no. Abraham's not even alive. So I don't know. I don't know what this individual was thinking. So, ladies and gentlemen, number 3 done, debunked. It's not a contradiction at all. If you're careful at all, even a cursory investigation, and then that last verse, I don't know, maybe the person just had an epileptic fit and typed in the wrong thing. I don't know what they were thinking, but that's not maybe I don't understand the context under which the person is making the objection. I have no idea, but I'm not entirely sure why that verse is even there, to be honest. Maybe I've made him. It's so absurd. It's so absurd that I'm beginning to think I made a mistake, that there's something I'm missing here. That's how absurd the mistake is. Maybe I've made a mistake. Maybe I've done something wrong. Anyway, I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the third one, done and dusted. I hope it helps. Yeah. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Peace.